Yo, today let's talk about my big fat L's. I don't know if this is self-caused. I do know a lot of it now that I've been forced to take all these L's and berated for not getting a W. As an Asian kid, I consider myself as an Asian failure. But at the same time, when I think more and more about it, because therapy is too expensive, eventually I come to the conclusion, or not conclusion, but I come to realize a lot of things that I should be angry about. And today I'm gonna just, try to sniff up my tears and snot and try to laugh about my huge fat L of a life. Huge fat L is like this gamer sort of lingo meaning loss or losing, as opposed to W, which is win, right? So I think my whole life is a big fat L. And I think I should be angry about it, given how much anger has been dispensed on me, which, again, hindsight 2020, they shouldn't even be, because they're the one who did this to me, whatever it was. So what am I talking about? I'm just going to try to talk as I think as I talk along. So now I'm a bit in a position where I have a professional qualification with none of the self-worth and confidence to back it up. Self-sabotaging when it comes to job applications. So what happened in my life was that I was subjected to what I will call the stereotypical Asian upbringing. Which means that you're pretty much allowed nothing but study, and any other thing other than study will be met with a level of scorn and disdain. And this includes very basic things like socializing with friends, hanging out with friends, particularly after school, because there's no because. And then you're not encouraged. In fact, you're kind of banned from taking a part-time job because you need to focus on your studies. And you're not allowed to even think about dating because you gotta focus on your studies. And that was repeatedly told to me when I was during my formative years, right? And a certain time, even for non-Asian kids, from a certain time, starting from maybe post-kindergarten, it became learning to grades pretty darn quick. And for an Asian household, getting A's is more neurotic in the Asian household than stereotypically any other type of household, where you're demanded to get all these grades, and this is where the huge L started to build up, where, yeah, you get all these A's and maybe you feel very happy and you make your parents happy, but eventually my soul started to feel empty because, yeah, grades are great, but does it really do anything like intrinsic, like for me, that I think like, is there like even a value within me? And the huge joke, I think, that the heavens have played on me is that they chose to put me, a creative person, into an Asian family. because they tried every single thing to ignore, demean, diminish this passion and skill, like genuine skill of mine. And if I may get a bit quote unquote cocky for a second, is that now I see these people who get like paid to do commissions, and they are literally worse than my type of artwork when I was 15. And they get paid hundreds for it. And if I had any, I couldn't even draw a stickman now without wanting to barf in a way, because of how much it has been stomped out of me, guilted out of me. Another big L is the fact that I was always this timid, shy kid, and my mother always told me about the story of how when she was having me, she was in this family drama, and that's why when I was born, I was just this anxious little baby that won't stop crying, and she always said it was her fault, which does a number on you too, you know. But the huge big fat L that I don't think I could help was that on top of being a timid, shy kid, I also tried so hard to obey my parents and conform. A lot of quirks I have within me is now kind of like stomped out, right? And I don't know what to say other than, you know, there's this conundrum, you know, this emotional knot where just studying for grades and being told that you're gonna be having such a great life if you just work hard in school, and talking about your future while you haven't even gotten to experience the present yet, you know. And then you feel empty now, but at the same time you have this endless, naive desire for your parents' approval, because it's like Franz Kafka, I think it was a Polish sort of, or was it Chechen, author. In his letter to his father, which was unsent, he said something poetic along the lines of, you know, it almost seems like children need their parents' permission to grow up. And to me, that translates to you need enough sustenance from your parents in order for you to develop normally and healthily. In my case, you know, having 90 and above 90 and above marks over 100 was just a given, you know, and expected. You can't really get any higher than that. And of course, in our parents' eyes, we're not supposed to, you know, get anything lower or even fail, God forbid, because they've provided everything for us. So what the hell reason do you have to be feeling unhappy about, or feeling unequipped, or just what reason or excuse do you have to not get, you know, above 90? And there was never like a connection. There was never talking. It's just them working, and credit where credit is due. They work hard. I take so many L's, man. So I'm this conformer, while I have this sister, elder sister, who's a rebeller, like a rebel rebeller. She even vented to me that her friends wanted to kind of like form a group and kind of come to our house to talk to our parents as to, you know, how it was so problematic that you don't let your daughter out to hang out with us, which I think it was a lie, but it was a legit sort of complaint nonetheless, don't you think? So she was a rebel, and she tried in her power even to secretly do whatever she wanted. Well, I was just a stupid conformer. And there was always this fear, intrinsic like fear of what would happen if they found out I didn't obey, And eventually that was kind of what happened. My grades tanked and I didn't know what was going on, My grades tanked, and that's on top of like tuition classes upon of tuition classes. And I just tanked, and my parents refused to accept it. And of course, depression was not seen as something that existed in our family, or in a lot of Asian families, to be honest. So any sort of mental or emotional issues is chalked down to being an excuse. And this is just a lot of L's in my life, that I'm forced to take. So my test scores were low. My emotional, mental health, whatever you want to call it, was an all-time low. And this is like a hindsight thing that I'm talking about. And your parents, especially when they're reminded that, this semester you're not doing good again with your grades when you did once before. So every time you hang out with them or anytime you're around your parents, it's sort of like, what do you call it? It's sort of like a, walking on eggshells sort of thing, So not only you're already down in the pits when it comes to your emotional and mental health, whatnot. You have the grades, the low grades to kind of prove your point. And if that is not enough, you have your parents, there to, push it and rub it in. Not rub it in as in like gleefully, but they rub it in. And they don't acknowledge your emotions other than you're making an excuse. Just pick yourself up. And again, I understand where they're coming from, but obviously it didn't help. And then another big fat L is that, and this is, I think, not my fault per se, and I have to accept this, is that all of your life as an Asian kid, and if the cap doesn't fit, don't wear it, meaning if it doesn't apply to you, good for you. If you don't relate, great. No need to get angry with me, but if you want to, it's a free world. So all throughout my life, all I have been allowed to do is study and nothing but study. And socializing, especially out of school, forget it. And remember how I said that my elder sister was a rebel, and she has her tight clique of friends? For me, again, I was a conformer. And I started to actually train myself to be content, to be satisfied and comfortable even, without any friends. And so, children grow up, and eventually I came to the age where my parents just wanted me to go to university. Just anything, just don't be like a deadbeat. And then they sent me to university. I didn't know independence, but I tried. I really did. I tried to make friends, didn't really keep them. We're acquaintances, we're okay with each other, but we're not really tight-knit or anything. We're just passing, friends and stuff like that. And I think the big, huge fat L, which is my mental health, if you will, kind of hit me was when, and this is like a hindsight analysis, so it's easy to explain to you now, is that they don't allow you to have friends, essentially because, you aren't allowed to go to birthday parties, maybe just because it clashes with one of your multitude of tuition classes. You're not really allowed to go to sleepovers, hangouts, especially after school, like forget it. You're expressly forbidden from dating because focus on your studies. You're not really encouraged to go out there and have extracurricular activities or anything else that's like, outside of what you would write on an exam paper, because you gotta focus on your studies. And suddenly, maybe as a late teenager sort of moment, suddenly they're scolding you why you're not going to extracurricular activities too. When you were in university, suddenly kicked into there because that's where your value lies, right? You're made to feel like if, and this is not just feelings, it's something that's ingrained so deep inside your heart and soul. Is like, if you don't go to university, you're gonna starve and you're gonna die and you're gonna get, I don't know, raped in the butt or something. That's how bad it feels. Like you actually kind of believe that and you don't even know it. Because that's how they ingrain you with, if you're not going to university, you're not going to earn a living, you're going to starve and you're going to fucking die, And if you want to be a fucking artist or any sort of creative shit, prepare to be H.P. Lovecraft or some other artist where their works only, their works sell for millions and be known worldwide only after you're dead, and that's what they told me. And so as a creative soul, that was like a double, triple whammy on top of all the stresses and all that, right? And at a certain point in life, they really lost me, they really did. And of course they kicked me to university, of course I pay for it all, so it's all sort of like a quadruple whammy, because again, it's a sort of cognitive dissonance, It's kind of like you feel a bit of resentment, you don't know why. And then at the same time, they pay like massive amounts of money because for your own good, right? So I've, eventually just got some sort of education in some sort of alma mater that I didn't want anything to do with in the first place. But, I can stand working because, memorizing versus working and, being practical work and all that is much different from what you just memorize in school. So that's something. So I came up with this qualification, even a practicing license. And the huge fat L is that after all of this shit, after all of this turmoil and after all of this fighting for my life, even, I come out with a sandpaper on my hand, my qualification. I'm like, I don't have any passion. I don't have any self-confidence. I don't have any self-worth. I don't have all of these to back me up. And of course I didn't have any interviewing skills, or I tend to self-sabotage so much when it comes to interviews. And on top of all of this, my already unhelpful sort of parents got even nastier by the day the moment they found out they need to spend more money in order for me to, until I find a job or something, which of course didn't happen because the foundation within myself isn't even really there. And on top of that, again, the huge L, I don't know by who, is that they got nastier and nastier, and you have to understand, I'm alone in a foreign country under huge pressure, And they just demand that I have to be tough, I have to be independent, why don't you have all these connections? Like, I know I'm an adult at a certain sense, but when it comes to my emotional maturity in certain senses, it's almost like I'm still that kid that like kind of shrinks back in fear whenever they express any kind of ire towards me, which they really do, and they do it a lot, you know. That at one point in time, when finally again they kept calling me, and they don't respect boundaries, if you will, is a new term that I learned. They keep calling me and miscall me until I pick up, even up to 30 times and shit. And what ended up happening every single time, with this overseas kind of call, is that they demand, why don't I have a job yet, and start to just spout all of these very unhelpful shit that they don't even realize they're the cause in the first place, And I'll say this again before I forget, is that just because you berate someone to have something doesn't mean that someone will immediately have that something. It's like, you can't berate confidence out of someone. In fact, if anything, you make them lose confidence. You can't just berate these values that need to be slowly and consistently instilled. You can't just scold it into someone, Can you just berate someone? You have to be tough, and you're just going to be like, yeah, I'm tough. Ding! It doesn't work that way. And that is why now, in hindsight, I get so fucking angry, because in the first place, they didn't allow me to have friends. They didn't allow me to do this, didn't allow me to get part-time jobs. And suddenly, when I come out here so unprepared, when honestly, back in the day, they keep saying that we're doing this for you, so you can study hard, we're preparing you for the real world, blah, blah, blah. And now you come out and you realize that they've done all this emotional, like, blackmailing and these threats and these, like, berating, that they've done anything but make us ready for the real world, They caused me in a way to be this way, and I know it sounds very blame shifty and all that. Some traumas last for life, you might even say that. I don't know why I say that, but basically they trained me and instilled in me and in a certain way, and then, conformist old me kind of conformed and broken myself into pieces and pieced them together, and basically just molded myself and remolded myself to fit into what they wanted. Of course, to, various degrees of success, because the no friend part, which probably they didn't intend, but, what else can you do if they just flat out don't allow you to hang out with friends? Then I switched myself, trained myself to be another way to cope. And now suddenly they expect me to have all these connections of networks throughout history or something so that I can get a job. Like, what? What? And on top of all these L's that I'm taking, I think the consistent theme throughout my life is that I've always been confused, because they keep berating me about something that's probably the opposite of what I am, And what I wanted to get to, that another huge L, is my elder sister. Because she achieved quote-unquote success the Asian parent way. And I must be looking a bit pathetic, like that how a bully sees a nerd with their huge glasses and hunched back that that's almost begging to be kicked. My elder sister was in on it. She would tell me things like, you act like everything is everyone else's fault and the world revolves around you. Imagine what that does to you, because I get it. If you have parents, there's a generational gap. There's always probably going to be a generational gap somewhere. But your elder sibling, the one that's supposed to actually, at least understand where you come from. And to hear all this unhelpful shit from her too. She never really treated me with respect. And to hear her, and in hindsight, you know what? Everyone really around me has wronged me. Because you think the world revolves around you when it came to me. And imagine having to be surrounded by people when you tell them, I was almost sexually assaulted. The universal echo from my father, from my mother, and then later, like much later, from my own uncle. You must have sent the wrong signal. Like, who fucking says that? And on top of it all, how the fuck are you supposed to feel anything like decent about yourself when you're surrounded by these people? It's like you're being raised in an ISIS sort of environment. From a very young age, you're taught to kill, and you actually thought that would be a virtue. And that's your reality. And to be surrounded by people who tell you that, oh, you must be doing something wrong because, when you get sexually assaulted or something like that. Like, how are you supposed to get out of the mental loop? And all throughout your life, by your own very own mother, who tells you that you're not going to get employed because your hair is messy, because you dress like shit, and because you act funny. Like, how many ways can you dress like shit in a suit? Like, in a fucking suit. Because, yeah, I'm in a profession. Like it or not, I'm in a profession that demands that I wear a suit to work. Okay? So imagine being told this constantly, and the sexual assault thing, when they said that to me, and that's not just from my parents, but from my uncle, like, in another time. It's not like they discussed about this and told me at the same time. They told me in different separate times, and I'm like, disconnected times, and I'm like, if a brain could implode, that's probably what it would be like, And I'm even amazed at myself, that I can think, to say one day, to just say to myself, wait, that isn't right. So imagine this kid who's been raised in a sort of terrorist family, terrorist mentality, and been taught that killing non-whatever people who are not outside is a virtue. And to be raised like that every single day, and suddenly one day just think, this is not right. It's nothing short of a miracle, I think. And again, I don't know if I've said this or not, or maybe I've deleted it, but there's this friend of Marilyn Monroe's who said, if Marilyn was dumber, she would have been happier. That's what she said about Marilyn. And I'm not drawing any, yeah, I guess I'm drawing a bit of parallels here. When I said that, sometimes I wish I was dumber in this aspect. Like, I wish I was just more conforming without questioning, without this gnawing feeling at the back of my head saying, this is wrong, this is such a disservice to you. And it took me stomping down my fuck you God, my God-given artistic talent. It took me taking so much blow, so much else to my empathy, which, this small thing that happened, a lot of other people can tell you so many different things and keep telling you you're okay, you're great, but sometimes it can get, it's 1,000 times easier to accept if only your own family members or relatives tell you that, because that's just how the human nature is in a way. It's very hard, by default you're kind of wired to your own blood because they know you the best, and to be honest, it's a sort of familiarity, which can act as a sort of very toxic sort of cognitive dissonance if they're abusive, and that sort of familiarity kind of locks you into the relationship as a sort of like cognitive dissonance, as a mistake for familiarity, for mistaken for being safe, which it isn't if you're in a toxic or abusive relationship. So I remember this one time that my aunt just held my hand one day and said, 辛苦了, she said. So in translation, that means, it's kind of like a mix between you've had it hard to, you just, a bit of like a sympathy for you having it hard. And immediately I understood where she was coming from. Is because I've been like this. People are more readily dispensing their ire upon me than anyone else in the family, because I seem to be the one who look like I can take it. I certainly have the, empathy for it, and maybe I make the facial expressions that make it logical or, cathartic for them to say things to me. They'll make me pull different sorts of faces, a pained one, most notably. But I remember this aunt telling me that you have such a kind heart. I find it getting colder and colder. So much colder. The longer that this goes on, the longer that I'm alive, and the longer that I think about things, and the longer that they try to, get to me. And the most painful thing about it is, and this is another L, is that, I always said to myself, I wish they were the bad parents that, it's not like I wish them to be bad parents, but sometimes in a weird way that I do, because what is abuse? If someone comes out with a bruise on their eye, with knife like slash marks on their arm, that guy has been abused. So in short, I think what's in my head is that sometimes I wish there would just be this drunkard parent that just comes home every other day and beats me up silly, so that I have the bruises, I have the cuts to show for it, to say to myself first and foremost, hey, I've been abused. And maybe because it's so clear cut, just like my parents who were from poverty and seeing all these like successful, academics people who's living a great life just because they have a degree, just like that sort of clear cut trauma, it will motivate me to just have a plan and get out of there. But because the heart is so stuck in that little innocent, naive, stupid hope that they will approve of you somehow. And this eventually gets to be a very subconscious thing that you don't even realize you're desperately trying to do, because again, it almost seems like you need a parent's approval to grow up. Not that I mean it literally, but it's almost like unless you get through this hurdle, you get through this test, this exam, this threshold of pleasing your parents to a certain degree by way of approval, it's almost like you're always stuck there, as if you're stuck in a certain grade because you just can't pass that exam. It's so fucked up. So I'm stuck in this L. And another L is that it has been so embarrassing, humiliating to even begin to think that I'm suffering from what I'm suffering from, or to even try to verbalize, or even think, to be truthful to myself about this thing seems so humiliating, so embarrassing, because you're an adult now, bitch. You get what I mean? And it can get so damned hard. Because at a certain age, the empathy for your plight goes down more and more, because, especially as a man, and especially when you're starting to, go up to 30s and whatnot and haven't had your life figured out, it gets so embarrassing to even start to think that you might have whatever afflictions you might have, to be truthful with yourself what happened to you, because it's just like a flip side of bragging about that one goal you scored when you're a kindergartner, and it's like a more negative flip side of that. Hey, I've been bullied. Hey, blah blah blah. Like, and it's like, my parents, like, you're an adult. Take responsibility and take whatever initiative, blah blah blah, right? And I wish it were that easy. I wish it were. I've tried so many tricks. I tried psyching myself up, beating myself up, beating myself down, psyching myself down, whatever. I tried doing this, and sometimes repeating shit over and over and over. Well, it kind of does well for my slurring speech because of how long I've actually shut up, because talking never brought me anything but bad things, right? I went in front of the mirror. That's part of the psych up thing, where I went in front of the mirror praising myself every single day, to actually pointing at the mirror saying, you're so lucky that you're here. Your parents have funded you. What the fuck do you have to be unhappy about? I did that too. I did so many fucking things. I did try counseling. I tried talking to people. And that helped a little bit, especially if they mirror back a sort of relatable story and show that they really know what I'm talking about. Maybe that helped a bit. But ultimately, I'm catatonic on my bed. It's almost like I cannot get up. Well, that's what it is. I cannot get up. I cannot find a job, even though the job is literally my ticket out of here. And now I'm in debt. I cannot even afford to buy any plane tickets to avoid visa violations. I don't even know what to do. My parents, I cut off my parents when it comes to verbal communication, alright? Do you believe it that they can hurt you so bad with words that you refuse to speak to them anymore? And that's one thing that I have to convince myself to not regret or to not feel bad about, because, when they miscall you like 30 times a day and have nothing but unhelpful things to say that bog down on your mental and emotional state. When you try to hint to them and tell them that you don't listen, just stop. I just had to put a stop when it comes to communication that involves our voices. Because at this point, I'm so oversensitive in a way that if I hear the voices, I remember every single, it's almost like a flashback of what they've done to me all these years, that I've finally, it's like a double-edged sword if you try to go back and face your past. Is that they have so many years. And before I forget, let's just put it here, They always say they do all this, work so hard, and go so far, in order for us to have a tertiary education for our own good. It's our golden ticket, it's our ticket out of whatever backwater country we came from, which of course I get. It's, there's a good intention buried in there, some way, somehow, somewhat. But, and when this thought came into my head, I fucking freaked out. Because in my head I thought once, if it was just so important, and if you just railed on us again and again about how when you were younger you didn't get a chance because you were too poor to go to university and get a stable job, like a profession that makes you earn big money and all that, why haven't you gone to university yet? Especially after, and I know this, you were quite well off when I was younger because of, your family business. It was booming. The economy back then was great. Why didn't you go to university? If you really wanted it that bad. And when that thought came up some way, somehow, I was like, oh my God, I have goosebumps right now. Because, when you were younger and even as an adult, they keep saying these things, and it's so convincing because you feel it in your heart, in your soul, yeah, they didn't have a chance, so they're giving us this chance. Then why didn't they take the chance? Why can't they be the example? And most of all, if they really wanted it that bad, why didn't they just go get it? Why? They could have just hired some sort of accountant or some sort of person to take their place. Why couldn't have they done it? Why couldn't have they gone to university? Instead of using that as leverage in a way. Emotional leverage against us for us to go to university instead. I get it, I probably would never regret going to university because a bit of the experiences that slowly woke me up. But at the same time, I feel like my whole life, and not only childhood, even my adult life, and my important life, like in my important years of my life, has all been robbed away from me. And of course, partly maybe I'm to blame. And again, thinking back, I'm just a scared piece of shit that can barely fight for myself. And that's another thing, another huge L in a stereotypical Asian society, is that your parents don't teach you to self-advocate. In fact, if anything, they tell you to avoid anything, to avoid being conspicuous, You've been told to stay down low. And even for, benevolent stuff, they'll tell you don't pet that cat, or don't feed that cat, or don't feed that stray. And when you're just frustrated at the politics nowadays, you say, you know what is it, this is what I said, why is it so hard for a fucking politician to do their damn job? Even if it's not, just basic function, why is it so hard not to take bribes and money? And I said, you know what, I go up there and they say, no, don't go into trouble. And there's always talk about leaving a better world for your kids. And these Asians couldn't be bothered. They only want to work with their head down low, work as hard as possible, get all their cash and money as much as they could. And look now. They're kind of in poverty because they never fought in the first place, because, again, in their head, it's already a defeat. Saying, oh, the world of politics is like black suit. You can't go in there unscathed. When is ever doing right an easy thing, in my opinion, And of course, okay, I get it. You didn't fight for our future, fine. In other ways, maybe you tried to fight for our future by just keep pushing us to school. And that is fine too. Again, this is part of the rationalizing I do and explaining I do for my parents in a way. And I still believe in it in some sense, I believe that they had the best of intentions for me, or good intentions. I'm just so done with it all, And I don't even know what I'm done for. Maybe my life, man. I don't know what to say. It's just a bundle of hurt that never goes away. You don't have any self-worth, self-confidence, and you're supposed to be a professional. And when you're a professional, sometimes it feels so inauthentic, because it almost seems like professional is this cover term in order to just slam down any mental or emotional sort of turmoil that you have. Which comes with the word, honestly, I get it, but it almost feels inhumane, because we are all human. When you have some sort of issue back at home that really bogs you down, oh, professionalism. And I get it, sometimes when I'm more optimistic, I'm like, yeah, I want to do a good job. I can't let this, person I'm servicing down. I get it. Sometimes I think like that too. But at the same time, I feel like this word professionalism sounds so cold, And that's when I'm in a more despairing, turmoily, emotional state, I suppose. So here's my huge L of a life, where I feel like I don't have any control at all. And Not only I don't feel like I have any control when I'm making any sort of progress, it seems like all the world, not world, but all the people that were supposed to be important to me all keep poking me down, and think that they're helpful doing it. And now I'm not independent, even though I want to be so bad. But at the same time, when you're lying on this bed for days without eating and you wonder what the fuck's going on, then you become me. I'm a huge L'er. I'm a huge L when it comes to the Asian experience. I'm an Asian loser. My whole life is a whole fucking L. Every single one of my family think I'm fucking up, while every other people that are not blood related telling me that I'm strong, I'm doing it right. First of all, does it matter? And second of all, doesn't help. I don't feel like my life's going anywhere, aside from a bit more painful revelations and more painful revelations on top of more painful revelations. Oh. Man, this is not easy. And again, it's very humiliating to admit, because people would automatically assume and be in that emotional position to judge you and say that you're just whining about your past. Stop being stuck in the past. Like, it's so damned easy, is it? It's like telling the house, like, stop, dropping all the roof tiles. And the house would be like exasperated, yelling back, "But I don't even have a firm foundation!" You get me? So here I am, Every single day, I have to battle myself as to which side is right. And if I don't battle it, the thoughts will immediately come that I'm a scumbag, remind me of how much I failed in life, remind me how I'm so financially dependent, how the people who are providing for me keep trash talking me. It doesn't make it easier. And the intrusive thought that people would immediately chime in and say, "Wow, you're sponsored and you're kind of financially supported by your parents. Wow, what are you complaining about, you whiner?" And there's a lot of layers upon layers about the thoughts that would come to your head. Okay, I'm just gonna save this. I don't know if this will help someone. I don't even think this will help myself, but let's save this, kind of post this online somehow, shall we? Let's go.